Thank you for choosing American Pest CEUs. Hi, I'm Sean Reeves. I'm an Associate Certified Entomologist with American Pest CEUs. I've been in the pest management industry since 1999, and I'll be your instructor for today's course. Today's course was compiled by Jack Launius, who has served in the pest management industry since 1990. Part 2, Northeast Core Manual, Chapter 4 through 5. Chapter 4. By definition, a pesticide product contains a substance that helps control pests. However, control will be achieved only if the substance can be used effectively. That means that, among other things, the pesticide product must be reasonably easy for you to handle, sufficiently safe for you to handle, in a form that can be applied in a way that reaches a pest, and chemically stable so it does not lose effectiveness too quickly in storage or after being applied. It is rare that a product will meet these requirements if it contains only the active ingredient, AI, that is, the substance that actually controls a pest. Almost all pesticide products contain inert ingredients that make the product usable. For example, they might make it possible to mix the active ingredient with water so it can be sprayed on plants. When an active ingredient is combined with inert ingredients, the result is called a formulation. Inert ingredients do not by themselves control pests, but they are not necessarily harmless to people. Risk and precautions associated with using a pesticide product are based on the entire formulation. People sometimes refer to the name a pesticide product is sold by, and other times by its active ingredient. This can be confusing because an active ingredient usually has two different names as well. You need to be aware of the different kinds of pesticide names so you can choose the best formulation for your needs. Trade, brand, or product name. The trade, brand, or product name is the name a manufacturer uses to advertise its product to customers. As an example, the trade name of a familiar mosquito repellent is Deepwoods Off. The trade name appears prominently on the front panel of the pesticide label. Chemical name. The chemical name identifies the chemical components and structure of the active ingredient. Each active ingredient has a unique chemical name, which is listed in the ingredient statement on the front panel of the pesticide label. Most people do not use the chemical name when they refer to a pesticide product because it is usually too complex. For example, the chemical name of the active ingredient in Deepwoods Off is N-diethyl metatolamide. Common name. Because chemical names are complex, most active ingredients are given a shorter, unique, common name. Only common names accepted by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency may be used in the ingredient statement on the pesticide label. As an example, DEET is the common name of the active ingredient in Deepwoods Off. It is easier to pronounce and remember than the chemical name, and the odds are you have heard of it before. If an active ingredient's chemical name is simple, e.g. copper sulfate, it may also serve as a common name. Look at below. You can see we have one pesticide product with three pesticide names: the trade name, the chemical name, and the common name. A pesticide product has its own trade name and contains one or more active ingredients, each of which has its own common name. That sounds straightforward, but the relationship between pesticide names and actual formulations, that is, products, can be tricky. and you could easily buy and use the wrong product if you choose one based on the trade name or the common name alone. For one thing, any given active ingredient can be sold in products with very different trade names. As an example, DEET is found in more than 170 insect repellents, each with its own unique trade name. Any given pair of products containing DEET will have two different trade names because the products might be made by two different manufacturers and/or might differ in such things as formulation, amount of DEET, inclusion of other active ingredients, or labeled uses. Keep in mind that if the amount and types of active ingredients and/or allowed uses differ, the risk and safety precautions will likely differ as well. Therefore, it is not enough to know that a product contains DEET. You also have to check to see if that particular product in question meets your needs. On the flip side, products that are very different may have similar trade names. This happens because a manufacturer wants to capitalize on a well-recognized brand. For example, there are more than 80 insect repellents that have OFF in their trade name. Among these products are 20 different active ingredients, one of which is DEET, that suggests different risk and safety precautions and perhaps even uses, e.g., some might be applied to clothing but not to skin. You can see how easy it would be to buy and use the wrong product if you simply ask for OFF. The lesson to be learned here is that two very different products might have the same active ingredient and/or very similar trade names. To choose the right product for your needs, you need to look at more than just the trade name and common names on the label. You need to read the entire label. Terminology. Being familiar with some key terms will help you understand the advantages and disadvantages of common pesticide formulations. Carrier. A carrier is a solid, liquid, or gas material that is either an inert ingredient or something to which a formulation is added that helps you apply a pesticide product uniformly to a surface or space. Many pesticide products are diluted in a carrier, such as water or oil, and then sprayed onto surfaces, e.g., plants, building foundations. Solution. A solution results when a substance is dissolved in a liquid, such as salt in seawater. A solution's components cannot be mechanically separated, and once mixed, agitation is not needed to keep its various parts from settling out. Solutions are frequently transparent. Suspension. A suspension is a mixture of finely divided, solid particles dispersed in a liquid, such as chocolate milk, made by stirring a dry powder into the milk. The particles do not dissolve in the liquid, and the mixture must be agitated to keep them evenly distributed. Most suspensions will have a cloudy, murky appearance. Emulsion. An emulsion occurs when one liquid is dispersed as droplets in another, such as when you mix oil and vinegar to make a salad dressing. Each liquid retains its original identity, and some agitation is usually required to keep the emulsion from separating. Emulsions usually have a milky appearance. The chemical properties of an active ingredient can be a factor in how a product is formulated. For example, an active ingredient might dissolve in oil, but not in water. Also, different formulations containing the same active ingredient have different advantages. Formulations applied as liquids. Formulations applied as liquids are generally mixed with water in a spray tank, but in some instances, labels may tell you to use crop oil, diesel fuel, kerosene, or some other light oil as a carrier. Emulsifiable concentrates, EC or E. An emulsifiable concentrate, abbreviated as EC, contains one or more petroleum-based solvents, which give ECs their strong odor, and an emulsifying agent, often called an emulsifier, that allows the formulation to be mixed with water to form an emulsion. Most ECs contain between 25 and 75% active ingredient. ECs are among the most versatile formulations. They are used in most areas of pest control and can be applied with many types of sprayers. ECs have several advantages. They are relatively easy to handle, transport, and store, and require little agitation in the spray tank. They are not abrasive, will not plug screens or nozzles, and leave little visible residue on treated surfaces. However, the high concentration of active ingredient makes it easy to overdose or underdose through mixing or calibration errors. The petroleum solvents in ECs may be flammable, so store and use them away from heat or open flame, or corrosive, harm desirable plants, cause rubber or plastic sprayer components to deteriorate, or cause pitting or discoloration of some treated surfaces. ECs are easily absorbed through your skin, which is especially a concern because of their high concentration of active ingredient. A solution's formulation contains an active ingredient dissolved in a carrier. When diluted with a similar carrier in the spray tank, a solution is maintained so that agitation is not required after mixing. Solutions may be used without any sprayer, indoors or out. Wettable powders, WP or W, are dry, finely ground formulations that look like dust. They usually must be mixed with water for application as a spray and require constant agitation in the spray tank to maintain the suspension. A few products, however, may be applied either as a dust or as a wettable powder. The choice is left to the applicator. Wettable powders contain 5 to 95% active ingredient by weight, usually 50% or more. Wettable powders are one of the most widely used pesticide formulations. They can be used for most pest problems and in most types of spray equipment where agitation is possible. Because of their physical properties, most of the pesticide remains on the surface of treated porous materials such as concrete, plaster, and untreated wood. WPs are easy to store, handle, and transport. They have excellent residual activity and are less likely than ECs and other petroleum-based pesticides to cause unwanted harm to treated plants, animals, and surfaces. They also are absorbed by the eyes and skin less quickly than are ECs and other liquid formulations. However, WPs pose a greater inhalation hazard and risk of exposure to skin when you measure and mix the concentrated powder. They can be difficult to mix in hard, alkaline water and settle out quickly without constant agitation in the spray tank. They are abrasive to many pumps and nozzles, causing them to wear out quickly, often clog nozzles and screens, and may leave visible residue on treated surfaces. Soluble powders, SP. Soluble powders, or SP, look like wettable powders, but they form a solution when mixed with water, after which no agitation is necessary. The amount of active ingredient ranges from 15 to 95%. It is usually more than 50%. Soluble powders have all the advantages of WPs and none of the disadvantages except the inhalation and skin exposure risks during mixing. This formulation is uncommon because few active ingredients are soluble in water. Flowables, F or L. A flowable, also known as F or L, combines many of the characteristics of ECs and WPs. The active ingredient is a solid that does not dissolve in either water or oil, so it is impregnated on a substance such as clay, ground to a very fine powder, and suspended in a small amount of liquid. The resulting liquid product is quite thick. Flowables are easy to handle and apply, but are subject to spilling and splashing and have disadvantages similar to ECs. As with WPs, flowables require moderate agitation to keep them in suspension. They even settle out in their containers, so shake them thoroughly before pouring and mixing. Flowables contribute to abrasive wear of nozzles and pumps and leave visible residues on treated surfaces. Next, we'll look at water dispersible granules, WDG, or dry flowables, DF. Water dispersible granules, WDG, also known as dry flowables, DF, are like wettable powders, except they are small, easily measured granules. Once mixed in water, the granules break apart into fine particles similar to wettable powders, and constant agitation is required to keep the particles suspended in water. The percentage of active ingredient is high, often as much as 90% by weight. Water dispersible granules share many of the same advantages and disadvantages of wettable powders, except they are more easily measured and mixed, and they pose less inhalation and skin exposure risk during mixing and loading. Let's take a look at ready-to-use low-concentrate solutions, RTU. Ready-to-use RTU formulations require no dilution before application. They contain a small amount of active ingredient, often 1% or less, in an organic solvent, and some may need to be shaken before and during use. They usually do not stain fabrics or have unpleasant odors. They are especially useful for structural pest control. However, there is limited availability and high cost per unit of active ingredient. Many organic solvents harm foliage, so they often cannot be used as plant sprays. Next, we'll take a look at ultra-low volume, also known as ULV. Ultra-low volume, ULV formulations are very concentrated and may approach 100% active ingredient. They are used as is or in small quantities of carrier and are used at rates of no more than 1/2 gallon per acre. They are used mostly outdoors, such as in agricultural, forestry, ornamental, and mosquito control programs. ULV formulations are easy to handle, transport, and store and require little to no agitation. They are not abrasive to equipment, will not plug screens and nozzles, and leave little visible residue. However, it is easy to overdose or underdose because of the very high concentration of active ingredient. Specialized application equipment is required, and it is difficult to keep pesticide from drifting off-site. The organic solvents may cause rubber or plastic sprayer components to deteriorate and make it easy for the high concentration of active ingredient to be absorbed through your skin. Invert emulsions. An invert emulsion contains a water-soluble pesticide dispersed in an oil carrier. Invert emulsions aid in reducing drift, movement of pesticide, and air currents. The oil also improves rain resistance and serves as a sticker, spreader, by improving surface coverage and absorption. Because droplets are relatively large and heavy, it is difficult to get thorough coverage on the undersides of foliage. Invert emulsions are most commonly used along rights of way where drift can be a problem. Aerosols, also known as A. Most aerosols, A, contain a low percentage of one or more active ingredients in a solvent. They are either the ready-to-use type, commonly available in pressurized sealed containers, or products used in electrical or gasoline-powered aerosol generators. Ready-to-use aerosols. These formulations are usually small, self-contained units that release the pesticide when the nozzle valve is triggered. The pesticide is driven through a fine opening by an inert gas under pressure, creating fine droplets. They are used indoors or in localized outdoor areas. Commercial models, which hold 5 to 10 pounds of pesticide, are usually refillable. They are ready to use, portable, and easily stored. They provide a convenient way to buy a small amount of pesticide and retain their potency over a fairly long time. However, they are practical for very limited uses and are difficult to confine to the target site. They pose an inhalation risk and are hazardous if punctured or exposed to heat. Aerosols for smoke or fog generators. These liquid formulations are not under pressure and are used in machines that break the liquid into a fine mist or fog aerosol using a rapidly whirling disc or heated surface. They are used mainly for insect control in structures such as greenhouses and warehouses, and for mosquito and biting fly control outdoors. They provide an easy way to fill an enclosed space with pesticide but require highly specialized equipment and are difficult to confine to the target area. Respiratory protection may be needed due to the high risk of inhalation exposure. Formulations applied dry. Some dry formulations are applied without mixing them in a liquid carrier. Most dust, known as D, formulations are ready to use and contain 10% or less active ingredient, plus a very fine, dry, inert carrier made from talc, chalk, clay, nut hills, or volcanic ash. The size of individual dust particles varies. A few dusts contain a high percentage of active ingredient and are mixed with dry inert carriers before applying. Dust are widely used as seed treatments. In structures, dust formulations are used in cracks and crevices and for spot treatments to control insects such as cockroaches. Dust are also used to control lice, fleas, and other parasites on pets and livestock. Most dust are ready to use. They require simple equipment and are effective in hard-to-reach spaces, e.g. wall voids, and where moisture from a spray might cause damage. However, they are easily moved off target by air currents during application and by air and water afterward. They will not stick to surfaces as readily as liquids, and any dampness can cause them to clog and lump. It can be difficult to get an even distribution of particles on a treated surface. Dust pose inhalation and skin exposure hazards and may irritate the eyes, nose, throat, and skin. Granules, also known as G. Granules, G, are similar to dust, except they are larger and heavier. The active ingredient coats or is absorbed into coarse particles made from materials such as clay, corn cobs, or walnut shells. The amount of active ingredient usually ranges from 1 to 15%. Granules are most often applied to soil to control weeds, nematodes, and insects living in the soil, or for absorption into plants through the roots. They are sometimes applied by airplane or helicopter or to penetrate dense vegetation. Once applied, granules release the active ingredient slowly. Some require soil moisture to reach the active ingredient. Granules are also used to control larval mosquitoes and other aquatic pests and are used in agricultural, structural, ornamental, turf, aquatic, right-of-way, and public health, biting insect, pest control operations. Granules have several advantages. They are ready to use with simple application equipment, and their weight carries them directly to the soil or water target. They pose less risk of drift and applicator exposure during application than sprays. They may also break down more slowly than ECs or WPs if they have a slow release coating. However, they pose several disadvantages. It can be difficult to adjust equipment to apply them uniformly and at the proper rate. Granules will not stick to foliage or uneven surfaces, and because they may need moisture to release the active ingredient, they may be less effective under drought conditions. They may have to be incorporated into the soil. Also, birds can be at risk because they often feed on the seed-like granules. Most pellet, P or PS, formulations are very similar to granules except that all the particles are the same weight and shape. This uniformity allows use with precision application equipment. Other formulations cannot be clearly classified as liquid or as dry or solid pesticide formulations. A bait contains an active ingredient, usually less than 5%, mixed with food or another attractive substance. The bait either attracts the pest or is placed where the pest will find it. Pests are killed by eating the poisoned bait. Whether baits are formulated as solids, liquids, gels, or paste largely depends on what is attractive to the target pest. Baits are used inside buildings to control ants, roaches, flies, other insects, and rodents. Outdoors, they are used to control snails, slugs, rodents, birds, ants, and termites. Baits come ready to use. You can place them so as to prevent food contamination and access by children and pets. You can also remove them after use. With baits, you do not need to apply pesticide to an entire area because pests go to the bait. They control pests that move in and out of an area. Liquid baits. Be careful with baits. They can be attractive to children, pets, and wildlife if not placed properly. Dead rodents may cause an odor problem, and any animals who feed on them could be poisoned. Pests may prefer other available food to the bait. An old bait becomes a food source for pests if the pesticide loses effectiveness. Liquid rodenticides are mixed with water and placed in specifically designed bait stations designed for these products. They are effective, especially against rats, in areas where rodents cannot find water. They are also effective in areas of poor sanitation where readily available food renders traditional baits ineffective. Liquid insecticide baits are used primarily for controlling ants and cockroaches. They are ready to use, sugar-based liquids placed inside bait stations. Liquid ant baits are very effective against certain species of sugar-feeding ants. However, some ants will not feed on liquid baits. Liquid baits also must be replaced often. Let's take a look at paste, gels, and other injectable baits. Paste and gels are mainly used for structural pest control and are now the primary formulations used in cockroach control. They are injected or placed as either a bead or dot inside small cracks and crevices of building elements where insects tend to hide or travel. Paste and gels are applied with syringes and bait guns. Applying pressure to a plunger or trigger forces the bait out of the tip. Paste and gels are odorless, produce no vapors, have low human toxicity, and applicator exposure is minimal. They are easily and accurately placed where insects hide, which also minimizes human and pet exposure. They remain effective for long periods, but can become less attractive to pests upon exposure to other pesticides and cleaning products. Also, they may stain porous surfaces, and repeated applications can cause unsightly buildup of bait. Gels also can run and drip if exposed to high temperatures. Let's look at microencapsulated materials. Manufacturers cover liquid or dry pesticide particles in a plastic coating to produce a microencapsulated formulation. You can mix this formulation with water and spray it as with other sprayable formulations. After spraying, the plastic coating breaks down and slowly releases the active ingredient, similar to the way time-release cold capsule medicines work. This prolongs the pesticide's effectiveness, allowing for fewer and less precisely timed applications. Microencapsulated pesticides are less likely to be lost as vapors, reduce odors indoors, often reduce injury to plants, and the coating poses fewer hazards to the skin than other formulations, so that even highly toxic materials are safer to mix and apply. Microencapsulated materials, however, pose a special hazard to bees, which may carry the materials back to their hives because they are about the same size as pollen grains. The adults and brood can be killed. When the capsules break down and release pesticide. Under certain weather conditions, microencapsulated materials may break down more slowly than expected. This could leave higher amounts of pesticide active ingredient in treated areas beyond when they would be expected to be present. This increases the potential to injure field workers, so the label may require workers to stay out of a treated site for a longer time following an application. Animal systemics. Animal systemics protect animals against blood-feeding insects. They are absorbed and move within the animal after being applied externally as pour-on liquids, liquid sprays, or dust. Most animal systemics are used under the supervision of veterinarians. Fumigants are a type of pesticide, but we mention them here because they come in different formulations that always form poisonous gases when applied. Some active ingredients are liquids when packaged under high pressure and change to gases when they are released. Others are volatile liquids even when not under pressure. Some are solids that release gases when applied under conditions of high humidity or in the presence of water vapor. Fumigants are used for structural pest control, including in rodent burrows and food and grain storage facilities, and in regulatory pest control at ports and at state and national borders. In agriculture, they are used in soil, greenhouses, granaries, and grain bins. Fumigants kill a wide range of pests and penetrate cracks, crevices, wood, and tightly packed areas such as soil or stored grain. A single application usually kills most pests. However, the target site must be enclosed or covered to keep the gas from escaping. Fumigants are highly toxic to people, so respiratory protection is required. Next, let's take a look at choosing a formulation. Your first priority in choosing a formulation is to make sure that the product is labeled for the pest situation you need to control. Once you have done that, consider the following about each formulation before choosing a particular product to do the job. Whether the formulation will stay in place long enough to provide the desired control, the risk the formulation poses to you, the environment, and the treated site, whether you have the application equipment and personal protective equipment needed to apply the formulation. Equipment concerns, including agitation, tendency to clog nozzles, and wear on pumps and hoses. How easy is it to handle and measure the formulation? Whether you need to dilute the formulation in a liquid carrier or can apply it as is. Whether you will be able to use all of the product. For example, an EC product with 8 pounds AI per gallon can typically cover a much larger area than an equal amount of EC that contains 2 pounds of AI per gallon. If you don't need to cover the larger area, choose the product with 2 pounds per gallon so you don't end up with leftover product that you have to dispose of. Price. Using the previous example, if you do need to treat a larger area, it is often less expensive to buy the product with 8 pounds of active ingredient per gallon than it is to buy 4 times as much of the product that only has 2 pounds per gallon. Formulations on the product label. You can often determine what the formulation is by looking at the product label. For example, a product with EC in its name means it is an emulsifiable concentrate. If the formulation is not part of the product's name, you can usually find it mentioned in the general information or directions for use sections of the label. Next, we'll look at the codes for the different types of formulations. A equals aerosol. AF equals aqueous flowable. AS, aqueous solution or aqueous suspension. B equals bait. C, concentrate. CM, concentrate mixture. CG, concentrate granules. D, dust. DF, dry flowables. DS, soluble dust. E, emulsifiable concentrate. EC, emulsifiable concentrate. F, flowable liquid. G, granules. GL, gel. L, liquid or flowable. LC, liquid concentrate or low concentrate. LV, low volatile. M, microencapsulated. MTF, multiple temperature formulation. P, pellets. PS, pellets. RTU, ready to use. S, solution. SD, soluble dust. SG, soluble granule. SP, soluble powder or soluble packet. ULV, ultra low volume. ULW, ultra low weight, ultra low wettable. W, wettable powder. WDG, water dispersible granules. WP, wettable powder. WS, water soluble. WSG, water soluble granules. WSL, water soluble liquid. WSP, water soluble powder or water soluble packet. Sometimes the relative amount of active ingredient will also be mentioned along with the formulation in the trade name as follows. For liquid formulation, the number usually tells you how many pounds of active ingredient are in each gallon of product. For example, 4EC in the name would indicate that the product is flowable with 4 pounds of active ingredient per gallon. In this example, there would be 10 pounds of active ingredient in a 2.5 gallon jug of product. Sometimes, the number will refer to a metric measurement, such as grams of active ingredient per liter of product. For dry formulations, the number tells you the percent active ingredient by weight in the product. For example, 60 WDG indicates a water dispersible granular formulation that contains 60% active ingredient by weight. In this example, a 10-pound bag would contain 6 pounds of active ingredient. Adjuvants are chemicals that are either pre-mixed in the pesticide formulation or added to the spray tank to improve mixing, application, or pesticidal performance. They perform specific functions described later and may reduce or even eliminate some common spray application problems, thereby improving overall pesticide efficacy. They are used extensively in products that are applied to plant leaves. Adjuvants can be used to customize the formulation to specific needs and compensate for local conditions. Adjuvants themselves have no pesticidal properties, so they are not registered by the EPA. As a result, there is no set of standards for composition and quality, although some states have modified registration requirements for these chemicals and may require labels, technical data sheets, and efficacy information. Kind of adjuvants. Much of the confusion surrounding adjuvants is due to a poor understanding of adjuvant terminology. For example, many people use the terms adjuvant and surfactant interchangeably, but not all adjuvants are surfactants. Surfactants, also called wetting agents and spreaders, help pesticide spray droplets wet plant foliage and spread out evenly over a leaf. This can help improve the pesticide's effectiveness by increasing a pest exposure to it. Surfactants are particularly important when applying a pesticide to waxy or hairy leaves. Without proper wetting and spreading, spray droplets often run off or fail to cover leaf surfaces adequately. Too much surfactant, however, can cause excessive runoff and reduce pest control. Stickers. A sticker increases the adhesion of solid particles, e.g., powder suspended in a spray mix, to target surfaces. Stickers can decrease the amount of pesticide that washes off during irrigation or rain. They also can reduce evaporation of the pesticide, and some slow down the degradation of pesticides by sunlight. Many adjuvants are formulated as spreader stickers to make a general-purpose product that helps the pesticide spread over the leaf surface and adhere to it. Extenders. Extenders function like stickers. They retain pesticides on the target surface, slow evaporation, and inhibit degradation by sunlight. Plant penetrants. Plant penetrants enhance penetration of some pesticides into plants. Some may do so on one species of plant, but not another. Enhanced penetration increases the activity of some pesticides. Compatibility agents. Pesticides are commonly combined with liquid fertilizers or other pesticides. However, certain combinations can clump, causing uneven distribution in the tank and, in some cases, plugging the pump and distribution lines resulting in expensive cleanup and repairs. A compatibility agent may eliminate these problems by helping the products mix well together. Buffers and acidifiers. Most pesticide spray mixes are stable between pH 5.5 and pH 7.0, slightly acidic to neutral. Above pH 7.0, alkaline or basic, the pesticide may degrade. Buffers and acidifiers prevent degradation by acidifying and stabilizing the water in the spray tank. They must be added to the spray tank to neutralize or slightly acidify the water prior to adding pesticides or other adjuvants. Drift control additives. Drift is the movement of pesticide away from the target area in air currents. Larger spray droplets are less prone to drift. Drift control additives, also known as deposition aids, improve on-target placement of the pesticide by increasing the average droplet size. The drift reduction may well be worth the small reduction in pest control that may result from the change in droplet size. Thickeners. As the name suggests, thickeners increase the viscosity, thickness of spray mixes. They are used to control drift or to slow evaporation after the spray has landed on the target area. Slowing evaporation is important when using systemic pesticides because they can penetrate the plant cuticle only as long as they remain in the solution. Defoaming agents. Some pesticide formulations create foam or a frothy head during agitation in a spray tank. The foam may interfere with the application and can usually be reduced or eliminated by adding a small amount of a defoaming agent. Foaming agents. Sometimes foam can improve the placement of pesticide in an application. For example, foaming agents or foamers can be added to a spray mix to reduce spray drift. Foaming agents are used to help pesticide get into voids that are difficult to reach otherwise. Examples include controlling tree roots in sewer and septic pipes and getting insecticides into gaps under stoops and slabs for controlling termites. Choosing the right adjuvant. No single adjuvant can perform all the functions we just described, but compatible adjuvants often can be combined to perform multiple functions simultaneously. When choosing an adjuvant for a particular pesticide application, consider the following guidelines. Use only adjuvants manufactured and marketed for use with pesticides. Industrial products or household detergents may interfere with pesticide performance. Be skeptical of such claims as keep spray equipment clean or causes better root penetration, unless they are backed up on the pesticide label or by supporting evidence from the manufacturer. Make sure the adjuvant has been thoroughly tested and proven effective for your intended use. Test questionable products on a limited area before proceeding with full-scale use. Certain pesticides and application procedures require certain types of adjuvants. Determine the correct type and use only an adjuvant of that type. Read the pesticide label. The Directions for Use section of the label, especially portions that provide mixing instructions, will often tell you which adjuvants, if any, are recommended, as well as when and how to add them to the spray mix. A particular pesticide label may require one or more adjuvants for a certain use, yet prohibit any adjuvant for another use. If you have any questions about the use of any adjuvants, contact the pesticide manufacturer or a manufacturer representative. Adjuvants are not always necessary. Knowing when not to use an adjuvant is as important as knowing when to use one. For example, a pesticide label might say not to use additional surfactants. Remember, too, that many pesticide products already contain one or more adjuvants. If a pesticide already contains the proper type and amount of adjuvants needed for your use, adding an adjuvant might actually reduce the effectiveness of the application. For example, adding more wetting agent may not give better spreading or coverage. Instead, it could increase runoff, reduce deposit, and even severely damage the target plants. Again, follow label directions to avoid this type of problem. Chapter 5. Most pesticides work by harming, and usually killing, the target pest. While this is good, pesticides might also harm us because as living things, we share many traits with pests. For example, insect nerves work much as ours do. Therefore, an insecticide that disrupts nerve function in insects might do the same to us. This means there can be some risk to us when we use pesticides. In this chapter, we will discuss what contributes to this risk with a focus on one of the contributing factors, exposure to pesticides. Many people use the terms risk and toxicity as if they mean the same thing. Confusing the terms can actually lead someone away from choosing the safest pesticide alternative. Risk, a pesticide's potential to cause you harm, is called risk and is influenced by two factors, toxicity and exposure. Toxicity. A pesticide's toxicity is a measure of its ability to cause harm. It is a property of the active ingredients, concentration, and formulation. Though you can't change a pesticide's toxicity, you can choose to use a pesticide that has a lower toxicity than other products. The toxicity of a pesticide is independent of its source. Whether a pesticide is derived from plants, insects, microorganisms, or minerals, or is man-made, has no bearing on how toxic it is to us. Exposure. Exposure occurs when you get a pesticide in or on your body. Exposure to a single dose of a pesticide is called an acute exposure. Chronic exposure occurs when a person is exposed to a pesticide or a group of related pesticides over a long period of time. There are two components involved when you consider how exposure to a pesticide contributes to risk. The first is how much pesticide you are exposed to, the dose, in an exposure event, keeping in mind that this is directly affected by the duration of the exposure. Dose is also affected by the concentration of active ingredient in the product or spray mix to which you are exposed. The second is how many times the exposure occurs. Thus, your risk increases when the dose and/or frequency of exposure increases. The risk equation is the relationship between risk, toxicity, and exposure and can be expressed as an equation: risk equals toxicity times exposure. To see that this equation works, consider that regardless of how toxic a pesticide is, your risk will be zero if there is zero exposure. Still, many people confuse toxicity with risk and equate least toxic pesticide with safest pesticide. But that ignores the role of exposure. Two everyday examples will illustrate the difference between toxicity and risk. Gasoline is extremely toxic to humans, especially if swallowed or inhaled. Yet every day, millions of people fill their gas tanks without incident. The toxicity is high, but gas pumps are designed to virtually eliminate human exposure. Therefore, the risk to one's health from filling a car's gas tank is very low. Aspirin has a low toxicity to humans. However, a child who opens a bottle and swallows many pills can become very ill. Here, toxicity is low, but the potential for exposure is high, increasing risk to children. It is this potential exposure, rather than the inherent toxicity of aspirin, that led to child-proof caps. They reduce risk by reducing the likelihood of exposure. Let's look at individual differences in risk. The risk equation explains how toxicity and exposure contribute to your risk of pesticide poisoning. But will your risk be the same as someone else's? The answer is not necessarily, and revisiting the aspirin example provides one reason why. Medications often instruct you to give a lower dose to small children than to an adult. A child weighs less, so it will take less medication to do the job. Likewise, it will take a smaller dose to make the child sick. That is, the child's risk will be higher than yours if you each swallow the same number of pills. Qualities of an individual that influence his or her risk of being harmed by a pesticide include weight. The heavier the person, the more pesticide that will need to enter the body to cause harm. Age. The youngest and oldest individuals tend to be more sensitive to pesticide exposure. Gender. Males and females may respond differently to an exposure. Also, gender will obviously be a factor in cases where pesticide exposure might affect the reproductive system. Health conditions. The risk of pesticide poisoning can be greater if an individual is sick or pregnant. Environment. Exposure to other chemicals in food, air, or water, or by skin contact may increase the risk of pesticide poisoning. These qualities are factors in pesticide selection and use when you think about where you apply a pesticide and who might be exposed to it afterward. You always have to be thinking about the safety of others, not just your own, when you use pesticides. How pesticides enter the body. The toxic effects a pesticide can have often depend on how it gets on or in the body. Pesticides can get into the body by 4 routes: through the skin, dermal exposure; through the eyes, eye exposure; being inhaled, inhalation exposure; and by being swallowed, oral exposure. Common ways in which you may be exposed to pesticides. With each route, pesticide gets on the body as well as into it. For example, oral exposure might cause injury to the lips and lining of the mouth, as well as cause illness due to pesticide being swallowed. Dermal exposure. Not wearing gloves or protective clothing. Not washing hands after handling pesticides, containers, or equipment. Not washing hands before using the toilet. Splashing or spilling pesticide on skin. Exposure to spray or dust drift. Applying pesticides in windy conditions or overhead. Touching treated plants, soil, or animals. Eye exposure. Running eyes with contaminated gloves or hands. Splashing pesticide into eyes. Handling dry formulations without eye protection. Applying pesticides in windy weather. Oral exposure. Not washing hands before eating, drinking, smoking, or chewing. Splashing pesticide into your mouth. Inhalation exposure. Handling pesticides in confined or poorly ventilated areas. Handling dust or powders. Using inadequate or poorly fitting respirators. Exposure to spray or dust drift. Dermal exposure. The skin receives the greatest amount of pesticide exposure. About 97% of all exposure when spraying pesticides is by skin contact. Also, once absorbed through skin, pesticides enter the bloodstream and are carried throughout the body. Some pesticides do not pass through the skin very readily, while others are quickly absorbed and can be as dangerous as if they were swallowed. The amount of pesticide that is absorbed through the skin depends on the chemical itself, as well as how much of it gets on the skin, but it also depends on the product formulation and the location and condition of exposed skin. Effect of the formulation on dermal absorption. In general, oil-based formulations such as emulsifiable concentrates are absorbed through the skin more readily than water-based formulations. Likewise, water-based formulations and dilutions are absorbed more readily than dry materials. With any formulation or dilution, the amount of active ingredient that gets absorbed will be higher if the concentration of active ingredient is higher. It is easy to get dry formulations on your hands, and that could lead to oral exposure if you put your hands to your mouth or touch food before you wash up. Effect of exposed skin on dermal absorption. The scalp, forehead, eardrums, and groin area absorb pesticides more quickly than other areas on the body. Pesticides are absorbed through cuts and scrapes more readily than through healthy, intact skin. Hot, sweaty skin absorbs pesticide faster than cool, dry skin. Eye exposure. The eye is extremely absorbent. Blood vessels are very close to the surface, so pesticides can be easily absorbed into the bloodstream. For their size, eyes can absorb surprisingly large amounts of chemical. They are also very sensitive to many pesticides, some of which are corrosive and can cause severe eye damage or blindness. Inhalation exposure. You can inhale pesticide gases, dust, and fumes if you are not careful. The largest particles that are inhaled tend to stay on the surface of the throat and nasal passages. Smaller particles and gases can be inhaled directly into the lungs. Once they are absorbed through the surfaces of the lungs, chemicals enter the bloodstream and are distributed to the rest of the body. Inhaled pesticides can damage the linings of the nose, throat, and lungs, and those that enter the bloodstream can cause damage to organs and tissues throughout the body. Oral exposure. Oral exposure to pesticides can be very dangerous, but swallowing a significant amount of pesticide is rare among pesticide applicators and almost always due to inexcusable carelessness, e.g., storing pesticide in a drink container. More commonly, oral exposure occurs when pesticide splashes or drifts into your face, or when you forget to wash your hands before eating or smoking after you've handled pesticides. Exposure to non-applicators. Other people can become exposed to pesticides that you use. After application, people might touch treated surfaces. Someone who walks into a pesticide storage area could inhale pesticide vapors. Another source of exposure to pesticides is through food. Some pesticide that is applied to crops during the growing season may remain on the produce at harvest. The precautionary statements portion of a pesticide label, which is usually located soon after the ingredient statement, will typically provide information related to which routes of exposure are of concern. Usually, such statements will be under the heading Hazards to Humans and Domestic Animals. Routes of entry statements are not uniform on all labels. Many variations are found. Information on more than one or even all 4 routes of exposure may appear on a label. Congratulations, you have completed the course. Please proceed to the exam to receive your credit.